24 to 36 hours, people that I count on when the information begins to roll and I need to confirm it. 5 different areas, geographical areas of the United States. One in central Colorado, one in central Illinois, north central Ohio, eastern Minnesota, western Wisconsin area, and upstate New York. I rely on these folks to give me the information that just will confirm or reconfirm for me what I'm hearing from one area there, and they're fairly widespread. And basically what it comes down to is this. That these agencies, and they're just a few, but these agencies have seen the greatest expansion of training. They're ramping up this training in-service training, a lot of overtime, a lot of extra time being dedicated to this. In some cases, the most training that they've done in the past 2 years has been dropping down on them from state and federal agencies saying, look, you've got to perfect your plans, your protocols in these areas, and there are 2 areas specifically mentioned that have connections to these 5 areas. Now, there are other areas I just simply didn't have the time to check, but number 1, Hawk, is the scenario that they have had to deal with, plan for, and then execute their response for dealing with large numbers of displaced people. Now, look, we've talked many times about the potential for roadblocks and shutting down the traffic grids because of some biological or other reason, nuclear perhaps, but in this case it was displaced people specifically, and that's the word that was used, who are considered to be refugees from various states. They've been caught on the ground, having flown in or traveled in. And what do you do with tens of thousands of refugees in a greater metropolitan area, perhaps Minneapolis, perhaps Bloomington, Decatur, Illinois area, Lima, Tip City, Ohio? You know, we're talking just about off the map here. And what do you do with those folks? How are you going to handle them? And that was the one scenario, and why that particular scenario? I mean,
so you're talking a collapse of the transportation system, then?
That's exactly correct, and that's the way they described it here. And when I mentioned that to you this afternoon, it was exactly that. It was a shutdown of the transportation grid, whether that be airlines, rail, buses, just straight vehicular traffic, doesn't matter, but the grid is being shut down. And the second scenario was that they had to plan for and try and execute a protocol for was 5,000 vehicles stranded on a beltway around, you name the city, a bypass area where people were suddenly stranded. Their vehicles would not run. Or there had been some major incident, either one, but the people were actually leaving their vehicles and swarming the local neighborhoods and business districts, so forth, in their given area. And how was law enforcement going to possibly come up with a protocol to do this? Because you're talking about people over maybe a 3 or 4 or 5 mile area suddenly taking off for the hills, but in this case the city suburbs. And what were they going to do with them? Were they potential victims of some biological attack, or was there some other issue, perhaps an EMP pole?
An EMP, yeah.
That's right, that it stranded vehicles, and this was specifically one of the sub-points on their come up with a protocol on how to deal with this, and it's just amazing, Hawk.
And this is current training, Greg?
Yes, right now training.
Okay.
And they are, I mean, it's within, the last couple of weeks on forward, they're planning for it now. Why now? And why that particular one? As I said to some friends this afternoon, I said, of all the scenarios, that would be one of the most disabling, one of the most difficult to deal with, is an EMP strike. And a year or two back, I had some military folks just suggest to me that three airbursts at 50,000-60,000 feet over the west, central, and east part of the United States would wreak havoc beyond anything we can imagine. Everything from your calculator to your dishwasher to your automobile is not going to work.
To the total power grids.
That's correct. Everything will be down. We'll be in one flash, and that's essentially the scenario in the book. It's 1 minute after, 1 second.
1 second after, yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've not read the book, but I've heard a lot about it. And I'm just saying, this was incredible that it just comes together at this moment. Now, you add to that the comm links for police departments across the nation,
Fire, hazmat, everybody, yeah.
Well, and they're trying to get those hardened, the TAC teams and regular communications, so that they can continue should there be an EMP strike. Hazmat, of course, those types of units that are locally generated, and crisis response units at all levels. They're trying to get them, but I will tell you that the vast majority of fire, rescue, and level 1 and 2 trauma care are not hardened. They would be sitting along the road with everybody else. And the people I talk to in North and Central Pennsylvania and Central Indiana who are on my call list and knowledgeable about that, they're involved with it, said absolutely not. They wouldn't move 1 foot.
Now, I've heard about in some areas, let's say a state capital in a central Midwest state,
sure,
where there has been a large number of new radios being installed.
Correct.
In vehicles and such.
Well, they're especially at the greater level, the supervisors and up, because look, they've got to maintain communication with at least the upper echelon, because they're going to be taking their orders directly from state governors and FEMA and Homeland Security and all the alphabets. So
yes.
They have to have those, and the equipment is actually newly manufactured, and it's built-in hardened. It's already done that way. You know, our fighter aircraft and our armor and artillery and so forth, I'm sorry, the armored battalions are already hardened. And that's, you know, on the one hand, that's a good thing. But on the other, there's so much of our mid-level communications and necessary network out there that we just can hardly imagine. The levels are not hardened, and so they will go down immediately, whether there's a ground burst from a false flag or a terrorist nuke. They will go down locally, but if they're airburst and they're airburst high enough, it's going to wreak havoc across the continent.
Well, that's incredible, and that's why I've told people that was the third tripod of actual current training by law enforcement, even down at the local, county, state levels, in numerous places that you cited all over the country, that's ongoing right now, current training basically coming down from the top side, from the feds, and probably paid by them, because none of the states and counties have any money anymore, so it's got to be federal money doing the training, brother. And
that's right. And they do have regional areas where they are trying, and of course you and I understand that there are thousands and thousands of police vehicles across the United States. They can't get them all hardened fast enough if this would occur in the next few weeks or months. It just cannot be done. And so you've got vehicles won't start, the vehicles will die right alongside everybody else, and so it's a huge issue. So they're trying to get a little larger military type vehicles that are also going to be sent out to these local departments.
All the APCs and the bear vehicles, all that stuff, right?
That's
the tanks.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, you know, when you look at it from that standpoint, and you know, I just call these guys, say, can you give me whatever's happening that you think is important, that should be known? And this was the one common element. And then I did ask, because I thought, well, you know, in case they're going down a list and they don't know, but I said, is it possible that you're going to do any training regarding dealing with large numbers of people where there's a transportation grid failure or collapse? And he said,
from EMP or whatever, right?
Yeah. So it's there, and Hawk, all I can tell you is that we are, as I said in my latest article with News Reviews and my own website, I said, look, we're standing in the doorstep.
What's your website, Greg? Tell people.
It is theheartlandusa.com, www.heartlandusa.com. It contains the final Castle Defense article that I wrote a series of 4 on, and I just put in there, look, this is the final reload. We're seeing I believe, Hawk, from the various elements that I talk to that are similar but not the same as yours or Steve's, that this is the final build-up, the final run-up to whatever is going to face us in the next few weeks or very few months. You know that I just dislike with a passion setting dates because unfortunately, and although it's part of the component, and I realize we have to do it, I just sometimes are a little difficult with that because we don't know. Only the bad guys know the time frame, and we're trying to get the information out to people, and we don't want to panic anybody. We don't, but people have to understand
urgency.
This has a life of its own, Hawk, that is going to overtake all of us. One of these days, everybody within the sound of our voice for the last few years is going to say, whoa, here it is. It's finally here, but it's here nonetheless, and we got to deal with it.
And it'll all be local and 50 yards away from you, coming at you.
Yeah, that's right. And I want people ready more than anything, and that's what I do. That's what I've been doing, going out across the country here, and we'll continue that very heavily in the next few months as you know, I believe the countdown.
As events allow, yeah.
Pardon?
As events will allow you to travel.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. You know, it's just, and we don't have to deal just necessarily with our own creation of difficulties.